All right. So welcome again to our 2022 Women in Local Leadership Speaker Series. This is our first session for 2022, and we're very excited to be welcoming our Chamber Board Chair, Deirdre Savage from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts. And the session will be moderated by Jennifer Pinkham, who's also on our board, and the founder of Pfeiffer Pinkham. And before we go ahead and get started, I just want to take a few minutes to go over the program and then talk a little bit about what to expect today. So our Women in Local Leadership program, as I mentioned earlier, was launched a few years ago. It's an initiative to kind of spotlight women leaders in the region, get to know them better, get to know a little bit about their background and kind of what motivates them, a little bit about their companies, and just kind of get to know each other a little bit better. If anyone tuned into WATD this morning, you might have heard Peter talk a little bit about leadership, and leadership is a very important topic for us as we're moving into 2022 leadership development, making sure that we elevate leaders in the business community beyond the business community. So just a little bit about the program background. I also want to take a moment to thank our WIL sponsors for this year. We have 4 returning sponsors this year. We have Hollywood Agency, Partnering for Performance, Mountain One Bank, and also Mass General Brigham, who all came back as a second-year sponsor this year. We were very fortunate to welcome 2 new sponsors, George Washington Toma in Appliance and Steinberg HR. So if I could get all the sponsors to just do a quick raise of your hand. I just want to thank you all for your support of this program. It's so important for us to be able to do this type of programming, and we're really grateful for your support. So thank you. With that, I'm going to go ahead and just take a couple minutes to introduce both of our speakers. Forgive me for reading a little bit, but I want to start by just doing a quick bio for Deirdre. Deirdre currently serves as the Vice President for Government and Regulatory Affairs at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts. She has built an impressive career there for the past 17 years. Prior to joining Blue Cross Blue Shield, she served as General Counsel and Executive Director of Public Policy for New England Council. She remains involved in New England Council and is a board member and chair of their healthcare committee. Deirdre is a graduate of Northeastern University's School of Law and received her undergraduate degree from George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And she has been long time involved in the chamber in our government affairs work, and has served on the board and now leads this organization as the chair this year. We're very fortunate to have her. Moderating today's session is Jennifer Pinkham. Jennifer is a founding partner in the firm Pfeiffer Pinkham LLC. Jennifer's area of expertise is in employment law, civil business, and probate litigation, with many, many other specialties. She's very, very talented and has a lot of expertise in the business side of things. She's active in political campaigns and was a 40 under 40 awardee for the South Shore Stars, which is an award given to emerging leaders in the region under 40. She's a frequent lecturer and speaker on various employment law topics, and she's currently on the board of the directors for our chamber and also for on the board of trustees at Cardinal Spellman High School. So we are joined by 2 very prestigious ladies today, and I'm very excited to hear a little bit about each of you and get to know you a little bit better. So Jennifer, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so much, Courtney, and good morning to everyone. I'm excited to be moderating today and learn more about our incoming chair, Deirdre Savage. So Deirdre, tell us a little bit about your career journey. Give us a little bit of an overview about your career.
So first of all, thank you, Jennifer, for agreeing to do this. I've been in your spot, so I appreciate it. And for the chamber, first and foremost, before I begin, thanks for those that are joining today. it's fun. These things are fun, and I think important to do at different stages and just take a step back, especially for the women that have joined, and then of course some of my favorite guys as well. So I appreciate that, and Courtney for organizing. As we'll talk about throughout, is COVID, you know, creates challenges in all sorts of places. Doing this virtually and getting people here and things like that are always, are one of the challenges for organizations like the Chamber. But in any event, so Anne, for doing my overview, when you say 17 years, I continue to almost fall out of my chair knowing that I've been here for 17 years at Blue Cross. Well, not in my basement, but in at Blue Cross for 17 years. I started there, when the government was launching Part D, which was the benefit for seniors, the drug benefit, and the arc within Blue Cross and policy came from Massachusetts health reform, federal health reform, and everything that's kind of followed. But I go back, and my kids hate, especially the one who's in college now, hate me saying this because and it's the teenage eye roll to the max that occurs, which is where I am today and how I my career arc began with what I did in college. I was at George Washington and walked up to Capitol Hill. The reason I went to GW is I wanted to work on the Hill. I went up and knocked on the door of Ted Kennedy, Senator Kennedy's office at that time. And again, for those of you that are today, I'm actually celebrating a birthday. I'm in a second century or what? No, not whatever. I'm 51. But when I think, for those of you that are under a certain age, this is before you would have online inquiries to offices and getting resumes in. I literally just went up, knocked on a door, and asked to work there for free. At the time, and proceeded to do so for the next 3.5 years. And the people I met then and the policies I was exposed to and everything about that job shaped where I went to law school. My general counsel in that office went there, and I was like, oh, that's a public policy law school. I'll do that. And that's kind of how my story began. The one point, I know it's a question that's asked, that Jennifer's, and others have asked since I've been in this position before, is, at different inflection points. One of the first inflection points was I graduated law school. I was a litigator. I was big firm litigator, full caseload, court every other day, that kind of lawyer, and then realized, and I look to my friend Jennifer here and say, it's not about the law, but I realized I had gone to law school for another reason. And once you start realizing that, you start to think like, what am I doing? Because if I go down this path, I know that's not why I started this whole journey. And then I just decided it's like, I have to kind of think about leaving what I was doing and kind of enjoyed, but also knew it wasn't it. And another theme I'll talk about was reaching out to people, reach out to somebody that was a professor of mine in law school, but was also somebody I worked in Kennedy's office from years and years ago. And she is the reason I'll always meet with anybody who ever wants any kind of mentorship, because she met with me, put me in touch with a couple of people, and eventually that turned into meeting a person who met a person who met a person. And that's how I started at the council, ran their Washington office. And then again, why I will also, one of my advice to folks is get involved, be on boards, even if, whatever kind you think is. It was from working at the council, but getting to know a lot of their board members that this Blue Cross thing opened up. And I just decided, oh, yeah, that might be good. I like Blue Cross as a company. It was only a couple of companies I was willing to do it, and jumped in, a week, Christmas week, because we were launching on the July 1st. And then, January 1st of that year, and did that job and found out I was pregnant the second day of work. So that'll be another challenge about talking about being a woman and having to go to your boss before you've told your parents. Your husband and your boss are the only ones that know. Oh, by the way, I did not know this when I accepted the job. You talk to your daughter or wife about how that's physically possible, but I did not know I was pregnant when I took this job. So and he was a delight. Peter Mead, Peter, was the boss at the time. So a sheer delight, but that's life. So yeah.
Deirdre, when you were starting off back in Washington at GW more than 25 years ago, was there anything about being a woman at that time that going
so
into
different.
Senator Kennedy's office and getting that opportunity, were there many women that were working there at that time?
I have to say there were women in public policy, women in government has long been a place where women in law was a place where kind of when you got to that, around, again, that's 89 to 93, looking back, that was some place where you would find women. Now, women at that time that were in senior positions, quite frankly, a lot of women in those positions didn't have families. Like it was the only option for them was to work and not try and do a million, like have other aspects of their life equally fulfilled. We'll say that. It was a lot of that was my observation at the time. Now, the Hill in Senator Kennedy's office tended to attract, type A, throw your entire life into, and it was extremely intense. But yeah, no, they were, it was, I have to say I was lucky in that regard. Of course, the first chief of staff I had, the head of the labor committee, they were all men. But boy, were we the best deputies ever. And now we're running the place, but yeah, so. Yeah.
And tell the group about what your position is currently at Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Yeah, so I, my title and position are Vice President of Government and Regulatory Affairs. And that's, basically, especially on the federal side, again, thinking back to my first job and how well, kind of where it's begun. In that role of my job, which is, that where my actual job title, and if you were to read a job description is really what I do for the company is something, and why I love Blue Cross as a company is there's days I go in there and I know they're your health plan, and for many of you, and you're paying premiums for your healthcare and all that stuff. But Blue Cross also takes its social and civic mission pretty seriously. So we very much are in the middle of kind of those healthcare policy cutting edge issues. And Massachusetts, as a rule, is that. So, the ACA is brought to you by Massachusetts Health Reform. Massachusetts Health Reform is brought to you by entities like Blue Cross and others that kind of push the envelope. And I'm not saying solely, and I know I've got some friends from Mass General Brigham and others. There was many civic-minded organizations that did that. When we thought about how to pay providers differently. So the federal government looks to Massachusetts, and to our experience as the largest health plan is, how do you do it? Like, how does this work? How do you innovate? So that's actually where we spend a lot of our time on different initiatives that are kind of fall within that space, but sometimes, as of this week, as we were joining the call, my job first is, as from a federal policy person, is for those of you that don't know, as of Saturday, you are allowed to get your over-the-counter tests for COVID paid for by your health plan. But we were just told that 96 hours before Saturday, Monday night. So my job on paper would have said, Deirdre is going to tell us what this regulation means. And that is in fact what I do. But one of the other things to keep in mind, and something kind of for women here, and that job isn't, what you see on paper in that box around my title isn't really what I do at Blue Cross. It is, I ran the implementation, we strategically advise, like that is a title is the title. But what you do where you are really matters. So, as soon as we realized we had to do this, we had to pull together a full team across every aspect of the organization, from operations, how are we going to do it, to member services, to digital platforms, all of that to kind of roll out this benefit to our members. So one thing I would say is it's important to know what somebody's job is, but as you're talking to them, whether interviewing them or getting advice from them, understanding what they actually do, especially if they've been at an entity for 17 gazillion freaking years. So yeah, so.
How has your role changed over those 17
Oh,
years?
huge, huge. I mean, first of all, from the government affairs point, Part D was like, ooh, we're giving a drug benefit to seniors. Think about how much the federal government, for better, for worse, and I say this, appreciating people's politics as well, but just it being what it is, federal government is very much a part of healthcare. I know some of the folks on this call, Renee and others, are, yeah, we get that. It's how people get paid. It's how it's organized. You think of everything from health reform to things like the COVID. The federal government is very, very much a part of it. Always top item in elections, all of those things. So the how front of mind it is to people is huge. How people interact, quite frankly, how much it costs has changed, even over that time. So it's much more of people's budget, so they care more. It's really, it's an important part. My job, so from that piece, much more, and I've had a higher staff. I was the only person had a higher staff for that piece. My job is when you got this kind of tenure at a company and you start establishing yourself. We were laughing. The picture you all see for this invite is me 10 years. It was right after the ACA, federal health reform, passed. So I'm like, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I led that implementation at the company when it happened. So that's therefore the wrinkles and the gray hairs started to come. And that was like this massive effort. But when you kind of step into sometimes it's by chance, sometimes it's by, by design, it's by default, sometimes it's by design. Then you realize that you're demonstrating some kind of skills that the company needs, and there's gaps that you fill. So my job has been massively, I fill gaps all over the place. If we're thinking about a new line of business, I'm often charged with doing that, working with others. If we're implementing something like this past week, Deirdre's it's sometimes not even by design. Like I say, it's by default. Oh, Deirdre is doing this. Oh, Deirdre's doing this. So that's kind of how it's changed over time.
And how many people do you manage now underneath you, Deirdre?
Yeah, about a dozen. Generally speaking, that goes, I had one person, but to give you a sense of kind of what I was talking about is I think people, you need to find kind of when we think about careers and what we do is sometimes you don't need to necessarily, and I say this in two instances. One is you don't need to be a leader sometimes to be a leader. So sometimes you don't need to be the one with the most direct reports to demonstrate you're probably the best leader for certain things you do. And don't be constrained by your title or whatever that is to define whether you can demonstrate leadership qualities that will be leveraged. Make sure you're getting paid to be leveraged is another thing I would say to women, is that sometimes we don't look at that piece of it, but that you realize oh, I'm being used. And then, one thing, and I know I'm a little all over the place because I'm trying to weave in different pieces, but don't be afraid to make sure people know that you are doing that. I am not somebody that walks around like, look what I did, look what I did. It's taken me a long time to even acknowledge, to think about how do you make sure that people know that you did that and not just take it for granted that you do. That's something that's like a work in progress for me every day, because sometimes you just do and be done next. And people don't realize kind of what you're up to. Most people, advice I did receive at one stage is, nobody's thinking about you more than you're thinking about you in any organization. So sometimes you need to kind of realize that and, make sure you're understood for that.
So you mentioned a little while ago that you have kids. So how did your role as mother impact your career, if at all?
Well, it did in a big way. I get back to that time when I found out I was pregnant. But what was funny is that when I was kind of had made that, what is even funnier is, and for some of you, you're going to be like, oh my God. But back when John Kerry was running for president, is kind of where that story starts to take place. I already had a 1.5-year-old, and that was a conscious decision. That was, I was working in Washington. That's when I was running the office. And I realized Washington's a funny place. We had come back, my husband and I, after, he also went to GW, met him there. Woo. And we went to law school here, worked here. And we were down there for several years and started to, there's a famous scene, My Cousin Vinny, it's like, the biological clock starts ticking. And we started to realize, as, our lease was coming up again, we probably going to have to start thinking about this kid thing pretty soon. It's just something we wanted, but then realized Washington was a tough place when you come back to it, because it's a very transient city. And so I was thinking to myself, like, who do I call in a pinch for date? If I have a kid, and we started realizing, like, a lot of our friends, no offense, were like guys in their like late 20s, like not exactly like, I'm like, what is my network here? Yeah, no offense, but it was like, it's like, what's my network? And our family, my husband's family's from here. I'm actually from Long Island, New York. So, but we knew this is where we were going to settle eventually. So that actually, the decision to have kids, that dictated our move back here. But then it was funny, and for those political folks among us, when John Kerry lost the election, anybody who, and we thought he was going to win, anybody that knew John Kerry or knew like that world, everybody in Boston was like, we'll write our ticket because we're going to know the president of the United States personally, and whether we're going down to work there and all this. Well, then friggin' he lost the election. So now we were all sitting there like, oh God. So I was fine. I was at the New England Council. I was perfectly happy. But then the weirdest thing happened. And I say this as an appreciation for your first question about women and men and different things is, after the election, the phone rings, and it's a big financial services company, a very international one, but located in Boston, that called. And I knew that the group of folks that work there, and they wanted somebody to run all of their state affairs across the country, and had reached out to me knowing them from the council. And I liked them all. There was not one woman among them. And for some of the guys, there was a lot of stay-at-home moms or wives or moms that were involved. And I already knew I had a 1.5-year-old, and I was thinking about the second. Again, fast forward, I didn't realize I was about to become pregnant with the second. But I was like, I was talking to my husband that weekend after I met with them, and I said, I don't know, it wasn't the right fit for me. I liked these guys a lot, but it's, is it the right fit? Is it kind of what I want to do next? I liked healthcare the most. And, as some people have heard this story, is I said that weekend to my husband, it was something like Blue Cross, maybe I'd consider the move because I was comfortable. And again, as my husband says to this day, you could have said like cure for cancer, $1 million. Who freaking calls that following Monday? Blue Cross, out of the blue. And here I'm thinking, and of all things, I get this call from Blue Cross, like, hey, we have this position. And I'm like, God damn it. If I had only like wished for, like that kind of, I had one time where I could have said something and I wasn't quite wishing. And that's kind of how I ended up at Blue Cross. Now, when you find out you're pregnant, and at that time especially, and you realize you have to go in and tell your boss, it's really, really nice to have a boss that understands that and appreciates that, which is exactly what he did. And I did all the, I'll come back early from maternity leave, like I'll act like this didn't even happen, because that's what a proper person would do like this. I'll be like every other, this before FMLA and all this stuff. And, he turned to me and he's like, Deirdre, I don't need the psychiatry bills, from your kids because you abandoned them because of out of some weird, he's like, I hired you for the long haul. As it turned out, I lasted longer than he did, but, and he was a lovely guy. Blue Cross was a wonderful place that kind of accepted that. I will note, as a company, I will say leadership has evolved to represent what I'm about to say as a company more and more, but as a company, Blue Cross is over 80% women. Now you can say like, wow, that's like, what has happened there is, you have a lot of member service folks, women coming back from the workforce. Like there's different kinds of nurses and different kinds of things that were, historically speaking, had gone, had evolved that way. Now that's kind of probably not as, but like the average kind of Blue Cross worker is like a 46-year-old. I used to be able to be like, I'm like the average, now I'm like beyond a 46-year-old woman. So they have to, as a company, you have to be able to deal with your employees where they are. That's for that age, you're likely dealing with women that either have children or women that have parents. And from a historical perspective, it's not to say that men do not also deal with these aspects of their lives, but from a historical perspective, you're dealing up or down at that age. It's different than a 25-year-old, like it's different at those kinds of things. So yeah.
So I know there's a big elephant in the room, and that's COVID-19. And how has that impacted you and Blue Cross Blue Shield in particular?
Yeah. Well, our hats off to all the healthcare, we see it in so many, but our hats are off to kind of all the healthcare workers that are kind of managing us through as individuals, as people, through all of this. The pressure's on them. And you just think when it's about to be, I won't say over, but alleviated, back comes. And now we were talking earlier about whatever industry, and there's people with COVID now much more than you even knew at the beginning, and the stress of that. So it's hit everybody. We empathize highly with our with the healthcare workers out there. What I'll say is, as we went like everybody else virtual. What was a good thing is a few years ago, remember the year we got those like 100 inches of snow? We Blue Cross, once that time of we having to go remote, we heavily invested in IT and the ability to be remote. So we were able to quickly pivot. So I will say it's impacted every day what I do, literally, because I also kind of lead one of our COVID groups with somebody else. And it does impact almost everything we do every day. The remote nature of having the job I have, being a social human being, realizing how much you learn walking from meeting to meeting, not just in the meeting, really took me a long time longer than I appreciated, to get used to. Like it was not where I thrived at the beginning. And now it's you begin to manage that. We've invested a lot in kind of, given the size of our workforce, in the ability to like do better at it, so to speak, and make yourselves, especially with your teams, not just be about the meeting and then the next meeting and the next meeting and in your basement or wherever you are. So it has been pretty impactful.
And in policy development and advocacy work, I mean, you're used to meeting with politicians and all sorts of individuals to try to advocate and create policy. So obviously you haven't been, I'm assuming, meeting in person. So it really must have had a tremendous impact on your role.
Yeah, totally. And you just kind of, again, like everybody else, you pivot to how to do it. Just was on a call last week with, and we did it by, And in some ways, it makes it easier in some ways because, you know, we're on with Congressman Neal. He's the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, and a, you know, pretty important guy in Congress, one of my favorite members of Congress. And what was funny is we started the call and he had to go vote. And that typically happens when you're meeting with members of Congress, and they're quick, you just run down. And in the past, we'd have flown down to DC and we would have had all these stacked meetings. And this was with my boss, Andrew Dreyfus, our CEO. And it just turns into kind of a bleep show of trying to like manage a day. There it was like, oh, we'll just hang out here on Zoom for a couple minutes. And then he came right back. And, you know, now that we're all so used to it, I mean, I miss it very, 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 very much, I will say. I mean, I am one of these weird people. I like Congress. I like walking the halls. I like the energy that's there. I don't love it right now. And for some ways, I don't love kind of the way January 6th made me feel about it. But you know, there's a different energy. So, but at least we're managing through. Everybody had a pivot, you know, where there's I'm no more special or anything than others. But it is weird.
So obviously you're the incoming chair of the South Shore Chamber of Commerce. What are some of your goals and priorities that you'd like to see happen during your term?
Well, honestly, you know, first, you know, I know Renee had a jump, but again, a tip of the hat to Renee, who really managed as chair for 2 years. So she took the extra because of COVID, quite frankly. And you know, I think we're going to be managing our way out of COVID. What will, you know, from a kind of the social aspects and all of that, and knock wood, I'm hopeful. You know, a lot of the work that's been built on over the years, which is right, gets to the core, making the South Shore a great place to work, to create workplaces, to have good workforces, and to live. And all of that has a lot of policy implications and just practical for businesses. How do you create all of those things and make it affordable so that you can generate a new workforce, not just those that can afford to live here, and think about policies, whether it's transportation infrastructure and all of those things. But it's kind of like lead us out, knock wood, and I'll knock it everywhere, you know, be the person that's kind of trying to lead us out of the COVID kind of crisis. And do think about, has that changed how we want to be thinking about not just the chamber, but just about the nature of work in general.
So we've talked a lot about women in the workplace and how being a woman has impacted your career. Tell us a little bit about Blue Cross. Do they have a diversity, equity, and inclusion program? And what is it like there as far as women in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I think Blue Cross has been a wonderful company to be a woman at, and then to become a woman leader at. I didn't come in as a leader, I became a leader. Not unlike any other workplace, sometimes you just have to kind of take chances on what you're doing, realize that you don't know every piece of it, but sometimes you have to jump in and be uncomfortable and do things and give yourself the opportunity, but give the company an opportunity to see yourself as a leader and kind of promote you. And I don't just mean by title and things like that, but promote you as one within the company. They encourage that, which makes people better leaders, like things like becoming parts of boards, like joining external organizations. So that's important. I think from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective, we've grown. I think events of the past few years, whether social, so to speak, events, or even COVID, has revealed there's a lot more work to be done beyond just women in the workplace. And that's addressing kind of racial and ethnic disparities that exist. And so we very much pivoted over the past few years to really consciously think about that. So internally, that's, you know, thinking about bias within healthcare, thinking about cultural competency. Those are like, you know, we not only we take classes, like, we're part of it. But also as a company, realizing we are what health plans have for folks that, we obviously provide you your health insurance and do all of that. We manage with a gatherer of data. And why is data matter? It's not that we're using data in like some weird way when I say it like that, but for especially in the provider world, we have a better lens into kind of the holistic view of healthcare than just providers in and of themselves. So we were first kind of in the nation to launch a data gathering exercise to learn more about the race and ethnicity of our own members, and to kind of now tie that to kind of how providers are working with them. And we're giving providers kind of funds to try and start to focus for those that need help from an IT perspective from others. And we've done this in for different reasons over time. And then eventually, we want to start measuring outcomes for all members and realize that there's different aspects that influence people. So what they need for help for there. So we're really proud of that. It's just kind of in its launch phase. But, again, that's something where we know the government will be kind of asking us, like, how did you do it? And so I'll spend some amount of time doing that.
So tell me, has Blue Cross and Blue Shield changed as far as leadership over the years that you've been there? I know during our little breakout session that we had this morning, one of the individuals was from Coastal Heritage Bank, and she said, the bank is primarily comprised of women, but still at the board level, it's men. So
Yeah.
How has Blue Cross changed as far as leadership? Oftentimes you just said 80% of Blue Cross is women. My mother worked at Blue Cross in management 30 years ago. And she was a member of the management group there. And she was, I feel at that time, a woman leader. But how has it changed since you've come on board 18 years ago?
Yeah, it very, 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 very much. So our board is, it's an extremely diverse board. Over half, I believe, are women now. We have a woman, our chair of our board is a woman. Our previous chair is a woman. And then within the company, with the senior management level, our CEOs have been men. But I think, you're seeing our CFO, really importantly, a woman. And again, as I'll reference is, oftentimes you'll see women in HR and general counsels at company. When you see big companies, generally like a spot. And so what is exciting is to see women also in the CFO spot, in operational lead spots and things like that, which is, it has very, very, very much improved. And then women in those spots, not just being, even if it is like it was a general counsel role, which is, again, this really important role at the company, I'm not minimizing it, given more beyond just that role, business operations or business line. So my previous boss said that as well.
So what does leadership mean to you?
Yeah, it's funny. I go back to, you don't have to literally be named a leader to be a leader. I think it's about unifying people around a common purpose or a mission. It's about whether you're trying to find the collaboration, which I actually think women are, again, I'm not saying exclusively, women are really strong at finding collaboration, and also not let it get bogged down. And so I think that's an important part. I do think, you do have a role to inspire others, and you do also have a role in chaos to bring calm, to bring poise. That is what my last week was about. And I just, sometimes you go back to what was most recent, is that's why I was leading that. It was complete chaos. People were out of their minds. And how do you bring calm? Not unlike some others who I know on the call, and I put men and women among them, George included, you look for kind of leadership traits and what you aspire to be. I think humor is important in a leader. You have to not take yourself so seriously. I do think one of the most important things to me is being authentic. You know, when you start pretending, it becomes obvious. And I think we all know people like that. It doesn't mean you have to, like, you know, be your craziest self, but to bring who you are. And some days I'm better at that than others, but ultimately you just have to be really good at what you do. But it's those kind of qualities that will make you a leader of many, and eventually, you know, whether it's in your organization or otherwise, rise.
So I'm a Blue Cross Blue Shield member. So you got any inside tips as far as how I get paid for these COVID-19 at-home tests?
Submit them now, and you will get it. I will tell you, we will be moving to a place where it's at the point of sale, you'll just get it for nothing, which is really kind of what you want to have to do. No health plan was really able to stand that up quickly enough. We will be soon. And when that happens, it's almost any farm. What is the biggest problem? We were talking about supply with Lindsay, Toma. Problem is you can't get the friggin' test,
Right.
but do go on the White House website starting tomorrow too. So
I'm very curious to see if it crashes or not, but I'll be.
I know. We're not promoting it until we see too. People, we just had a meeting. I'm like, I'm not promoting it till I see if it crashes first. So
yeah, absolutely. But I just ordered, I think 6 or 8 at-home tests from Amazon last week. So it's just because you can't get them anywhere locally.
I know.
I probably called 4 or 5 CVS's, and then I gave up and ordered on Amazon. So
we will have an online option too. We will have an online option too. Amazon's kind of rough to create that with, but we're trying to figure it out. So, yep.
Well, as Courtney mentioned, we would love to open it up to questions for Deirdre. So anyone have any questions for Deirdre based on what she said or anything new that maybe I didn't ask?
Okay. Deirdre, I have a question
George,
for you.
George, wait. Oh, sorry. Who was that?
Oh, go ahead, George. You can go.
Morning, everybody. Deirdre, great job. Thank you very much. You mentioned Lindsay. So one of the things, leadership, everybody has a different idea of what leadership is. And anybody that works for me will tell you I'm not a good leader. And most people don't appreciate my humor. And these Zoom calls really make things difficult to be funny. So I didn't get to say anything, but what I wanted to say is happy birthday. And anybody else want to join me in singing happy birthday?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh.
Everybody off mute right now. We're singing.
Do it.
Turn your mute off.
Come on.
Recording.
All right.
Happy
Birthday
to you.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday,
dear Deirdre.
Happy birthday to you.
Oh, it was wonderful. I feel it's still
Nice job,
recording
George.
though. So
It is.
I
Maybe we'll
spared
cut
you all
that
by
out.
staying on mute.
Courtney, please edit that part out.
I will. I will try to edit that part out.
So what a trooper for sharing your
Thanks,
birthday with
George.
us. Wow. Thank you.
I can't see other. I thought I heard somebody else saying. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Now I do. Judy.
Yes. Hi. I thought that was really exciting to hear your story, and I appreciated it so much. And I also appreciated that you spoke about always being available to mentor or to have a conversation and open a door. I think that's so important that we do that for other people. So I do have a young person that I've been mentoring for years who would definitely be someone I'd love to connect you with. She's at Northeastern right now and on a law track, but she wants policy. So how would be the best way to open that door for her to? Thank you so much. I will take that right now. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. That's great. Yep. That is the best way. And then it's just the old scheduling that starts to take place of life. So, but yeah, totally.
Thank you.
Yep. And that's another thing I miss. I miss being able to invite young people to things, especially policy people and stuff like that. That's always something I would do, is just for exposure and things like that. And it's frustrating that there's not enough events for them to kind of get that benefit.
Definitely. And I think mentorship is so key. I know for me, along my career journey, was able to reach out to other women in professional services, whether they were CPAs or lawyers, and ask them how they did it and what they struggled with and what their challenges were and what their successes were and how they navigated it. And it was invaluable to me. And so kudos to you for keeping that door open for others, because I'm sure it benefited you and you know how it could benefit other young people.
Yep.
Regardless of their gender, it doesn't matter.
No, and that's not, I appreciated somebody taking the call and doing something with that. And it becomes on that person, but at least getting those insights. It's really, I appreciated it.
Okay. All right, does anyone?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you very much for sharing your story with us, first of all. So I have somebody that I am kind of mentoring a little bit, and she's not within my organization. And one thing that I really struggle with for her is throughout my career, I had people that helped negotiate my salary for me. So I didn't necessarily negotiate when I got new jobs or promotions. It was negotiated for me. So in this day and age, how do you negotiate more salary? Because that's something that she's struggling. She feels like she really deserves more pay. And I don't know how to tell her to do that because it's not something I ever had to do in my career.
Yeah, I have, and, or at least positioning. And sometimes it wasn't always about, sometimes it was position versus pay. And, but again, one often goes with the other. I do think it's important that it's just not a one-on-one exercise. I will say that depending on the organization, it's hard. So for me it was kind of gut checking that I knew, my value, and understanding what others perceive that to be. So that was an element of it, so that if I knew it needed to be socialized for a particular reason or a promotion or something like that, I knew that that support existed. So I wasn't going in blind. I think people need to have a realistic view of themselves and work on those things that others see, especially at the executive level. Executive presence is one of those tough nuts to crack, and something that I think sometimes women struggle with, sometimes they don't, but it just kind of depends. I think lots of people struggle, but I do know that's one of the secret kind of women things, like, her executive presence, because it's kind of one of those, like, you can check it off types of things. So if that's kind of first how I'd validate. I think you go in with a plan and you don't allow yourself to get distracted from the plan. You allow yourself, because sometimes you do that, you have a close relationship with your boss. And you can, you spend 40 minutes talking about stuff and then you have to hit them hard with the old, I need more money call. And that's, so you kind of need to set up that time and a process for you to have the conversation, and then just be direct. Take the feedback and know what to do with that feedback when you get it. I mean, it isn't a subtle exercise. And I remember, I go back to, they're not thinking about you. And again, it's, even though you're a boss, and even ourselves as leaders, we should be thinking about all of our, associates that work for us, the same amount of time. We're often worrying about our own stuff too. So you're the one that's worrying about you the most. You're the one that knows what you do. But I'd be ready to be talking about why and how you've advanced from the last time you got one. So I don't know. Those are all kinds of things. I do not take that conversation lightly. It is not an off the cuff conversation, because I hate it. I literally hate it more than anything, is those kinds of conversations. So, but I've seen people be successful, and I just had one of my own folks approach me, and thankfully I had kind of a plan. When he approached me, I knew, I'm like, all right, I know kind of how, and at Blue Cross, it's a very process driven, it's by this date, we do this and this and this. And I knew when I'd be submitting and stuff like that, but it's a tough one.
It is. I would also say that you need to just be open and communicate directly and ask for what you want. If they don't give it to you, that's the worst that can happen, right? But if you don't ask, then you're not going to receive it. So I think women, I think, have a tendency to be shy about asking for what they believe they're worth. And I think that to advocate for yourself, there's nothing wrong with that. I know at my prior firm, at the end of the year, there was one year I was not happy with what I received. And I just said, this is not what I'm worth. And they went back and made it right, or I felt made it right. And I think that if I didn't ask, they would have been fine giving me what I had, right?
Sure.
And so you just have to be not ashamed to speak up for yourself. And if they say no, that's the worst that can happen. The one piece of advice I would also give is don't threaten or give them say, oh, well, I have another opportunity. I think that leaves a bad taste in an employer's mouth. And I think that just having an open dialogue doesn't leave a bad taste. You know, trying to advocate for yourself is completely legitimate and professional. But I think if you're trying to really threaten or say, I have another opportunity that's, and look, the market's hot right now for employees. This is an employee's market. But I think that those would be the key pieces of advice I would give that mentee that you are working with.
Great. Thank you very much.
Any other questions for Deirdre?
Okay. Well, thank you both. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Deirdre. It's great to get to know you a little bit better, and super
For better, for worse.
excited to have you as our chair this year. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Thank you again to our sponsors for supporting this programming. We do have a good lineup for this year. We're still securing some dates, but please stay tuned. Check out the website later today. We do have pretty much the first half of the year set up. So please check that out, and hopefully we'll see you on a new little session in March. March should be the next one. And if anyone wants to get in touch with Deirdre, her email is down below, but you're also welcome to email me directly, and I'm happy to share that information as well. I think for today, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Deirdre. Thank you,
Have a
Jennifer.
good one.
Have a good
Bye.
day. Thank you.
Thank you.